Hi guys, we are Sistah Sistah. Ow. We have another great and inspiring guest with us on this episode, Elena Romero.
She is a published author, teacher, a co-host on CUNY TV's Latinas show, a mom of 3 young girls. She's balancing a lot.
Elena, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. Let's start with where you're from, where your family's from, your background.
Born and raised in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. My family's from Puerto Rico. My mother was born in Bayamón, my father from Matillo, and I am still in Brooklyn to this day. Now I live in Bushwick.
Nice. So you consider yourself a Brooklyn chick? What?
I'm a Brooklyn chick all the way. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Being a Brooklynite, right? You're living in a time where it's hip hop, there's a lot of culture. So tell us that from your background and your upbringing, what was that moment where you say, whoa, wait a minute, I want to write about hip hop fashion? Like, talk to us about that.
It didn't happen so directly, right? So I first want to walk you through, I guess, the famous line of when did I fall in love with hip hop, right? And although I'm a Brooklyn girl, I ended up getting connected to hip hop through my cousin who lived in the Bronx, who would eventually move from the Bronx to live with us because he wasn't doing so well in the Bronx. He was getting himself into a little bit of trouble. So to try to keep himself out of trouble, he would live with me and my mom for a little bit. And that's when I started hearing the stories, because he was a little bit older than me, maybe about 6-7 years. So he had the boombox. At that time, I was about 11 or 12 years old. My mother had me in the house. I wasn't allowed to go out. So my connection to hip hop was through movies, right? So here I'm hearing the live story, the oral history on my stoop. And I was like, okay, this is something I really want, I'm really into. But I didn't dance. I definitely, couldn't rap. Couldn't draw, you do this graffiti. So for me, I was just, an admirer. And years later, now I'm in college and I've got a ton of friends who want to be in the music industry, who want to be music writers. I went the general journalism route and I really collided with it by accident. In 1996 is when I got my fashion break as a fashion journalist. And among the people that were contacting me back then were brands that I had heard of, but had not necessarily been featured in major newspapers or magazines. Those brands were like Mecca USA, Maurice Malone, Carl Kanai, brands that I knew of. So quite frankly, my fashion journalism career grew parallel to those brands. So as my work grew, because I was covering those brands at a trade publication and I was giving them that light and attention as to how they were making those moves within retail, my career was also breaking because I was getting now the scoops that the mainstream magazines weren't getting. So fortunate for me, when Puffy got into the clothing business, I outscooped the New York Times. So that's where the relationships started coming in to the point where I was covering it on a daily basis for about 7 years or so.
That's amazing how you started in one path, but then emerged into something else. I feel like in a way you're a hip hop historian because you're documenting the evolution of the fashion. What do you consider yourself?
I'm a hip hop baby, right? I'm part of what's considered the hip hop generation. So no question, that's part of who I am, my culture, being Nuyorican, being raised in the 70s. This is really the place to be. I'm from New York. There's no way to not have hip hop in your blood. It's almost like impossible to remove it out of your coexistence living here in New York City. But for me, I am both a participant and an observer, right? Which gives you a different perspective on the culture. So I'm a participant in the fact that I love hip hop, but I'm still far removed where I can have somewhat unbiased opinion as to what's going on and piecing the stories together. Yeah, to some degree, I guess you could say a cultural historian, specifically more so that 90s time period, because that's where my work really came through, but really across the board.
I mean, 90s hip hop, yes, hip hop started in the 80s, but 90s hip hop is like,
well, hip hop started even before the 80s, which is why now we're coming close to 50 years. But in terms of its commercialization, in terms of its global impact, absolutely. And the fashion is just kind of one element of it. It's how we express ourselves, right? How we dress and what we wear makes us feel a certain way, right? Many of us grew up poor, not having a whole lot, but yet we made sure we had a fresh pair of kicks. They had to be clean. We had our, our outfits, our jewelry, and that was it. That made us feel like we could live on lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Did you ever, you're a Brooklynite, you're this young Latina doing something actually that has never been done before, because you were saying that hip hop was going into the mainstream and there wasn't a voice. Did you ever feel challenged, intimidated because there was no one there, or you probably being one of the first?
To answer that question, I didn't realize what was going on at the time that it was going on. And it was probably better that way so it wouldn't get to my head, right? I'm in my 20s and I've got, the power of the pen. I've got major retailers and manufacturers, ears. When I wrote something, they paid attention. In fact, because I worked at a trade, whatever I wrote actually could even influence their decisions in terms of media, in terms of buy, in terms of, how many amount of goods to put in their stores, whether they wanted to pick up a brand or not. Was I fully aware of that power? No. There were plenty of music journalists out there, right, that paved the way. For me, I was in a different lane only because I was covering fashion. And I was the only one interested in really doing that. It just turned out that it worked out for me. And in fact, now it's come full circle where now I could actually now use that expertise and share those stories and make those stories come to life yet again.
Absolutely. Speaking of power, speaking of your power, you wrote a book. It was released a few years ago, just a few years ago. Who was your original target audience for your book, Freestyling, How Hip Hop Changed the Fashion Industry? Would you say your mission was accomplished, or did it reach a larger audience than you expected? And in what way?
Well, I think it's important to know that anybody who has a book idea, unless they really know the right people, are not going to have that idea come out as soon as you have it. The idea for the book in and of itself, I had around in 2002. But it did not come into fruition until actually in your hands till 2012. For me, at the time when I had the book, in reality, it was too soon. When I had the idea, it was when it was really hot and bubbling. And then people at that time, believe it or not, they thought it was a magazine article. They didn't think it was sufficient enough for a book. So a little bit of time had to pass for somebody to decide, this could be something. And for me, that big break actually came through another fellow Latina. Zuleika La Antigua was someone who I freelanced for at Honey Magazine. And unbeknownst to me, she had read my original book proposal in 2002 when she was a desk assistant at a book publisher. Fast forward, right? I freelanced for her. She remembers me. Fast forward, she becomes a scout for an academic book publisher. And she was looking for book ideas. And through Facebook, I ended up hitting her up and going, hi, Zuleika, I don't know if you remember that idea? And she was like, you still don't have a book out? And I'm like, no, it hasn't happened yet. She was like, well, you know what? Let's revisit that plan and let's shop it. And as timing is everything, voila, book happens 2012. And the rest, they say, is history.
Oh my God! That is the coolest thing ever. Am I using the right terminology, like serendipity, when it was destined to happen?
And you never forget those who help you. And without her, it wouldn't have been made possible.
Oh, how cool are you? And then the relationships, like you say, those are so important and nourishing. One of those things. These are things that we always say on the show, so people know these stories.
Sure.
So you've been featured on the Today Show, Good Day New York, Video Music Box. Do y'all remember Video Music? Back in the day, 18 years after your first published book, before Netflix and Amazon started, the streaming services, you just said that you're the original influencer. You know what I'm saying?
Well, there's a story there too, right? And again, being from New York, and so first to answer YaYa's question, which I didn't get to, who was the book targeted to? It was my attempt of making sure that our history of people of color who really created this particular fashion that made many, many millions of dollars across the world and was to still up until recently considered a fad, for that story to be documented before someone else decided to give their version of the historical events and facts. So while I knew everyone was alive, while I still had access to everyone, then I went about and got the story, so to speak. So it was really meant for definitely my generation, but really anyone 18 plus, right? That wants to know exactly how did those brands break into the fashion industry. So if someone's an entrepreneur and wants to launch a brand, they can learn from their challenges, their successes, and their pitfalls.
You were featured on the Netflix special, The Remix, Hip Hop and Fashion, and Amazon Prime's Fresh Dress. So you guys look our girlfriend up in those special, but talk to us about that experience.
Well, I think it's always very flattering when you get contacted to I'll tell the story in another format for it to be on film. And I got a call from Sasha Jenkins to tell the version of the story that I knew from the perspective of the journalist. Years later, I get a phone call from, well, actually, let me backtrack. Back to my Latina connections. Martha Diaz, who ironically is one of the co-curators of the Universal Hip Hop Museum that is now in the Bronx, had connected me with Lisa Cortez, who is another Afro-Latina, and she was working on this film. But for one reason or another, we were unable to connect. Fast forward, and I'm able to go to a Parsons fashion show, and I bump into Misa Hilton. And Misa and I are talking, and she's like, you need to be in the film. And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I contacted Lisa, but we just kind of lost touch. She says, I'm gonna contact her for you. You need to be in there. And literally just like that, she contacted her, and days later we were filming, and that's how I made it. I wasn't even originally supposed to be in that film. I came in just as they were doing final cuts. There was not even a certainty that I would make it. So the fact that I did was really exciting, and it really worked out.
That's awesome. I mean, your whole story is about relationships.
And it's never worked out the first time. God only knows I've tried so many things, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. But usually, again, it's perseverance, it's connecting the dots, it's being patient and not giving up.
And which is really important, because a lot of people, when they try to pursue something, if it doesn't work out the first time, they think, oh, it's not meant to be. You can't think like that, because then that just shows that you don't really want it that bad, or you're not willing to do what it takes to find the other avenue. Like, imagine if you didn't mention to
Martha Diaz.
You hadn't spoken.
Well, she was my first connection, but it was then me bumping into Misa Hilton, who is one of the fabulous people that the film is really about.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Wow. Yeah, you know, you just have to be perseverant, like you said, believing in yourself, and having faith and passion of what you do, because when you have passion, you just don't let it go. Sometimes you have to make those mental reminders and affirmations that you have to continue. And if it didn't, like YaYa said, if it didn't happen this way, then let's find another.
And good people find good people. I think ultimately people remember you, right? So these are not people that I was in contact with on a daily basis, but when the time came, they thought of me, right? So back to not just relationships, but being true to yourself, because trust me, nobody's gonna try to help anybody that they didn't really like.
Yeah. Yeah, attitude is everything, because you want to be remembered for the right reasons. You want people to be like, oh, I remember that person's energy. Energy, I don't know. I don't know if it's with me getting older, or because I feel like growing up, I didn't really hear about energy. Now I hear everyone talking about like, the energy's not there. You know, the person's cool, but the energy is not right. Like, that's everything. If you don't feel the energy, or if you don't feel someone is genuine and authentic, then it's like, you're not going to be remembered for the right things. So,
and we call that energy different things, right? As a reporter, that energy is the reporter's gut, right? When that little spy sense says something, or you feel something, you got to listen to it, whether it's your woman's intuition, whether it's that reporter's gut, whether it's the aura. You know, we have to pay attention. Sometimes the answers are right in front of us, but we see what we want to see.
Absolutely.
That is so true. So now that we're talking about, you know, auras and beginnings, 2020, we have transitioned 2020. We are in 2021. it was a tough year, and we had no other choice but to adjust to new norms, and that includes, our professional growth. So you already had a bachelor's degree in media communication. Now, going into grad school in this new norm, how have you been balancing being a student, a teacher, which we're going to talk about in a few, and being a mom?
I think being Latina and growing up with an old school Puerto Rican mom gave me you have no other choice but to persevere and move forward. There was no ay bendito from my mother. My mother was very stern, and she was really a big proponent and advocate of women, moving ahead at any cost. So I decided to want to pursue academia full time and kind of make this transition. Journalism, for me, I've been doing it for over 25 years, but in 2002, when in a way the economy tanked and we started seeing changes in media and we're moving more towards digital, I kind of lost some of my footing. And at that point is when I went back to school and did my master's. And ultimately that was to open the door to end up writing my book. And I was able to do that. I made the conscious decision about 3 years ago that I really wanted to pursue academia full-time. And in general, it's extremely difficult to get a full-time tenure track position without the credential of a PhD. I was never one to do well on standardized tests, so that was kind of my fear. I had been out of college for 15 years. And at the time, I was an academic advisor at City College full-time, and I was teaching part-time. And my students were working adults 25 and over. So my students were really my inspiration because I saw them coming into my office. I advised at that time about 150 students, and they were doing exactly what I thought of, but was afraid to do, right? So I said, well, at this point, my children are a little bit bigger. I'm a single mom. I have 3 daughters. I have a 14-year-old now, a girl who turned 10 today, and an 8-year-old. And I was like, all right, I think if anything, there's never the right time for anything. But if a right time, I'm going to go at it now because a PhD is a minimum of a 5-year commitment. And so I did. This was well before me thinking COVID was going to happen or my next opportunity. So that next opportunity happened to be a full-time tenure track position as a communications professor. So I got accepted into the CUNY Graduate Center's urban education program for the PhD program the day before Valentine's Day. And several months later, I got an offer for the full-time position at FIT. So actually, I went after a full-time job and school at the same time. I will tell you that it is extremely challenging. I'm teaching remotely. I'm going to school remotely. I have children who are going to school remotely. So it's a lot. We are on a computer 24 hours a day. We are around each other 24 hours a day. It was an adjustment. I did not realize, as grateful as I am for my father, who had been my caretaker for my kids when I was working and my dad would watch the kids, I didn't realize how much he did for me until COVID happened. Why? Because now I had to cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner in between teaching, somehow figure out how I was going to get my schoolwork done. And my poor kids, they're on their own. That idea of having an adult help them through school, I teach live. So they're literally on their own with like 12 Zoom meetings. The good thing about COVID, and there is a silver lining, is that my kids had to survive and fend for themselves. So even though mommy would cook, and the first few weeks was deadly. I mean, I didn't know how to manage being a mom and being a worker at the same time. It was almost impossible. It was like nervous breakdown type of moments. Like, oh my God, how am I gonna pull this through? Because I can't be mommy and work, right? Whether it's doing the TV show, whether it's teaching. So I had to realize the new normal. I had to let my students know, listen, every once in a while, I might have a kid ask me a question, or they may see you. And sometimes it worked out. You know, I teach book publishing, and my daughter would overhear me say something, and she would go get a prop and give it to me so I could do show and tell. So sometimes the kids would get in the act. But in the kitchen, if they didn't see something they like, listen, the air fryer was their best friend. And my oldest, who had no interest in cooking before, empezó a hacer arroz blanco, freír pollo. So right now, it's gotten to the point where if mommy can't pitch in and cook, I got one going to bat. So we really helped each other out, really. So my kids kind of had to grow up fast, almost like latchkey kids, even though we're all home, right? In this case, we're all home. But people don't understand, just because we're all home, I'm in my woman cave. My room is my room, and everybody's in their own corner. They don't see me till afterwards.
Oh my God, you took it out of my mind. This is another level of latchkey kids, dude.
Oh, yes. And to the point, it's so ingrained, my experience is so ingrained that I actually wrote about it for my recent ethnography class, and I plan on presenting this idea of mothering through COVID in March at FIT.
At the risk of sounding like, yo no sé nada, latchkey kids, please explain to me and maybe anyone else who doesn't know what that is.
Oh my God, okay.
I was fortunate that I was not that, but pretty much growing up in the 80s, a lot of times you had young kids who had to be home before their parents. And so, you know, they came in and they had to kind of grow up on their own, and they had to make sure la puerta estaba cerrada porque mami está trabajando, or someone is, you know, unable to take care of them. And so they had to, again, kind of grow up fast.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like
in other words, the kid would come home from school y no hay nadie en casa. Tenían llave, right? But there was nobody to take care of them. Right. That's where the term comes from.
Yeah.
I did not grow up this way. My mother was always home.
I was lucky. Mine too.
Well, the good thing also is that the government and the city, the state started identifying this and started doing preventative programs and putting after school programs in the schools and other programming. So then the kids stay in school a little extended hours, so that parent can then pick them up and they're safe and they're fed and their homework is done, and they understand that they're doing what they need to do scholastically, and then not doing something else, which is growing up too fast, which sometimes can steer them to criminal and other behaviors.
To the streets and kissing boys and other. Okay. So with all that in mind, the government keeps going back and forth with learn in school, learn from home, face-to-face learning, or beyond 6 feet, stay your ass home and make sure you have strong Wi-Fi for these lessons learning. Without telling us where you stand as a teacher and as a parent, Elena, what do you think are the pros and cons of virtual homeschooling versus face-to-face learning during the pandemic?
There are pros and cons to every side of the argument. And a lot of it boils down to finances and resources. You know, I will tell you that it is possible to learn online, and it can be productive and successful, but it could only be productive and successful if everyone plays a part and in a role in that child's overall success. And the reality is that the 1.1 million public school children right now are not doing well. And it was because the systems weren't all there in place. We don't all have gadgets, right? There's a group of children who don't have computers or laptops. There's groups of children who don't have high-speed internet, right? There is also the reality that everyone does not have the luxury or the privilege, like me, to be able to work at home, to be able to be home to help the child, right? One of my friends who I interviewed for the project that I'm working on, you know, she said it best when she was like, this is not the type of environment where you leave your child to a caretaker, an abuelita or a tia, who's gonna understand the technology to get the kid on Zoom, on Google Classroom, to keep them on schedule. So really, that's really challenging. And then add the layer of children who may have IEPs, which means that they may need additional services and they may not be able to have the same type of interaction with their service providers. So there's layers to the conversation. For me, it was a personal choice and an easy choice to choose for my children to do remote learning because I have a compromised immune system, so I didn't want to give the risk of sending my kids to school, and then what if something happened to them? I couldn't live with myself, or if they brought it home, and then what happens to me, right? And it's a really difficult decision for a parent, right? And for me, I'm going, could I live with myself, if something happened? We always think that it can't happen or it won't be our children, but I don't want it to happen to anybody's child, right? Again, I was fortunate enough that I could be home to work. So it didn't make that difficult of a decision for me, right? But we didn't all have computers here. We learned that first time around. The sharing of devices, that did not work out well. So I had to do a tremendo tarjetazo, and I had to go to the Mac store and go buy a couple of Macs. So I was ready for September, and everybody had a gadget and everybody had headphones, even though I bought 4 versions already because they all break. So there's no easy answer. Unfortunately, because of the way the education system and the policies are laid out, there's this unfortunate expectation on the adult, on the parent, right? That one, to be an engaged parent means you have the luxury of sitting down and being their assistant while they're going to school. So you're going to school with them, right? And 2, that if you're not actively involved in all these, mommy, daddy chats on different platforms, that you're not engaged either. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Plenty of parents, especially working moms, have faced a very difficult decision. Do I go home and work with my children so they don't fail understanding the connection of education and moving our socioeconomic status forward? Or do I quit work, right? Because my child needs me. We shouldn't have to choose. But many women are choosing that, right? And it's difficult because what are we working for? If we paying for childcare, we would have to, and how many kids do we have? It becomes a very costly endeavor. So right now, parents really have their hands tied. For some, like I said, the on-learning experience, the child excels. But unfortunately, for the majority of them, and not because they're not capable, I want to be clear that although we hear in the news that there are a lot of Black and brown children that are not doing well through online, it is not because they're not capable. And it's also not at the expense or the fault of the teacher. Everybody's back is against the wall, right? This was not something that we had prepared for. And this is something of a live experiment, right? I believe, although it looks like they're not, that everyone in the positions of power that they are trying to figure out what is the best solution under the circumstances. And I have to stress to parents who I think at times have not thought about the bigger picture that, yes, this is challenging and this is difficult, but we're gonna get past this. If the powers that be decide that safety is the number one concern for our children, and right now the schools can't be open, so be it. School will always be, right? The physical building is not necessarily how we should define school. Yes, they need social interaction and engagement. Yes, that learning through a computer is not the best way to learn, but they're still learning. And what I believe as an educator is that at the end of this day, when said and done, our children learned an additional skill. Think about when you and I first got a computer or got to work on a computer. My kid is 8 and has mastered Zoom. I still haven't figured out how to create chat rooms in the thing. So I think, yes, it's hard, it's challenging, and there are, deficiencies in the actual learning process. But if we look at the positive side, our kids are spectacular and they're survivors, and they're gonna get through it with one more additional skill set than we ever had.
I tell you, I tip my hat to not only teachers, but parents that have been, as you said, going through all of this in these tough times. And I've been speechless through this whole process. And you know what? It's a work in progress. We're not going to know. We don't know the answers yet. We're still trucking, right?
And instead of complaining about it, or as we would say, bitching about it, right? Oh, the education system is broken. Okay, fact. What are you going to do about it? Right? So instead of bitching about it, I decided, and it really happened as a result of being a parent. This just did not come out of the womb, and I decided that I wanted to be an educator. That's not how this all happened. But once I became a parent and I realized how much education had changed since when I went to school. When I went to school, mommy would have to 2-3 weeks before the semester started, you turn 5, you cross the street, you enroll your kid, they're in kindergarten. Now, you literally have to plan where you want to live, the school you want to put the kid in before you even create the kid. The stakes are higher, and we have so much more now to lose. So once I became a parent and I saw the challenges that I faced figuring out how to find the good school, the good education, how to help my children, I started being a volunteer as a community education council advocate, right? I did that for 6 years. I became the Brooklyn Borough President appointee in education for a couple of years. And then again, marrying my interest in education, I'm specifically studying urban education with the hope that I could be part of the solution and not just part of, a bigger problem. So while you know me about on the fashion side, there are many levels to me, or many layers, as they say. Like an onion, you just gotta peel them back.
Right. But that you're a strong, empowered Latina and looking for growth, looking for people to move, to be better as not only yourself and as a community. And I love that.
If anything COVID has taught us is that we're here on borrowed time, right? That this idea of what life was, the rug got pulled, right out of us, right? Now we realize how valuable life is. Family, relationships, a hug, right? Love, right? All the things that we just took for granted. What are you gonna do with the opportunity that you were given, right? What is it that you want to leave? For me, it was like, I've got kids now. What's my legacy, right? Well, I've got a lot of work on myself. I'm far from being perfect. But if I could at least try to lead by example, right? Or at least persevere and break, obstacles. I'm a walking statistic. For all intents and purposes, I'm a single mom, right? I'm not supposed to be where I'm at. But what you'll learn is that really the main difference that will make one person different than the other is finances and resources. And the opportunity to have different finances and resources can start with education. Not that you need to go to college to be able to make it. That's not the message I'm trying to send out. What school does, whether that's elementary school, junior high school, college, or graduate school, all it does is open your mind. What you do with that information, how you process it, how you make those connections, right? And what you do with them is up to you. But for me, I want to make sure that as long as I'm living, as long as I'm here, I want to be purposeful and mindful of my role here. So my role is to just continue to share and document stories, and hopefully one day help our children reach that level of excellence that they all were meant to excel at.
This is a perfect segue to how you're already doing that, how you're making all these impacts. Tell us about your co-hosting this TV show that you guys that you're part of. How did that go about? Is that part of the legacy that you're trying to...
This goes back to those stories that, things don't work out for me the first time around. When I went to college with the intention of being a television reporter. And so I studied broadcasting and I did not get the gig. In fact, I never took a print course and I made my life in newspaper and magazine. So be it. Back to the connections, the relationships, timing, and what's meant for you is gonna be. I had completely lost touch idea of doing that once I was in my early 20s. You know, once those college loans hit and reality hit, it was like, oh, I want to be a television reporter. Okay, I'll take a job in communication. I'll take a job. And it worked out for me. I got a job still within communications, although it was not television reporting. And eventually it all worked out. A student at New York City Technical College had read my book, Freestyling How Hip Hop Changed the Fashion Industry, in a fashion marketing class. And she asked her professor if she could contact me because I worked at CUNY to speak at the class. I'd become friends with the professor, and maybe about 2 years later, she gets a phone call from the managing editor of CUNY TV, who happens to be the host of Latinas, telling her, oh, we've got this great show. And then she says, oh, well, you should really talk to Elena Romero over at City College. So when Tina Beth Pena had contacted me, I thought she wanted to do a story about me because I was teaching this great class called Race, Class, Gender in Media. And I figured, oh, maybe she wants to see how I teach this class and she'll cover me. And conversation led into, you have a communications background? And I'm like, yeah. She said, well, how would you like to do the show? And I'm going, me? Really? I haven't done it. I mean, I studied it, but I studied it some 30 years ago. So she was like, yeah, come on, come in, meet my producer, we'll do a test and we'll see. And literally that was like in November. We started shooting in January. Our show launched in September, and here we are in season 2. And I'm a TV correspondent, and I also produce for the show. At the ripe old age of 45, I got my big break. So again, the connect the dots, timing, people, I believe again that if you show your true colors and you're good to people, they remember you, and sometimes they help connect those dots for you.
I think the beautiful thing about women, not just around our age demographic, but I feel like women that were born in maybe the late 70s or 70s and on, we are teaching the younger generation, because when we were young, we were told, nah, once you have a kid, that's it, it's over for you. Once you get this age, it's over for you. Once you do anything that's different to society, your life is over and you should just be barefoot in the kitchen and that's what your life is about. No, we're not listening to grandma and mommy about that. We are teaching the new generation that at any age, you can flip the script, you can follow your dreams, you can have a new dream, you can help somebody else with their dream. There are no more rules.
The right thing to do is to do it, to pay it forward, and to bring somebody along.
Absolutely, porque lo que está para ti, nadie te lo quita. And that's the great thing about the show Latinas. It's a great show that encourages female empowerment, and we love to see that because that's what we're about. We're about female empowerment, and we need more female Latina representation in media. So we, of course, are huge fans of what you're about, what you represent, and that you guys are paying it forward.
Each of us are playing a role in telling our necessary stories. Kudos. I must give 1,000 thank yous to Tina Beth Pena, who came up with the show idea, who's the host of the show, who took a chance, right? Because whether or not I had a TV background, I was in college, right? And just because I did journalism in print didn't necessarily mean that I could do it or translate that into television. But she had faith in me, not only to give it a try, but also to, in a sense, mentor me and guide me. And the best thing about it is, she's open to hearing all the story ideas that we have and we pitch. And for me, I'm a kid in a candy store. I get to tell a story every month about fascinating people. They could be really ordinary people, or celebrities doing ordinary things, or ordinary people doing extraordinary things. These are young women, old women, cisgender women, non-gender, binary women. We're talking about across the board, all shapes and sizes, all shades, experiencing success, right? Whether it's in the kitchen, whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's in Hollywood, breaking barriers. And that's, the beautiful thing about our show. And hopefully, people will continue to watch and see why it is the year of the woman.
Yes, Queen. Yes.
I love it.
Well, here's the thing. As women, we're constantly juggling many hats or many balls in the air, and you alone, like you just have shown us most of your hats, because I'm sure there's more hats that you have.
Oh yeah, I left out a couple.
I can't fit in this 40 some odd minute episode. Pero juggling so many hats, what do you do to stay focused and centered during moments of doubt, or if and when you're tired and over it?
You know, one of the things I need to work on moving forward is creating more time for myself, or that self-care and that space. But for me, as of now, school has been my sanctuary, because it gets my mind out of the COVID thinking, because I'm on a mission, right? But that's work in and of itself, right? When I need a break, even in this time, I escape and get a manicure, or I escape and get a haircut. You can't do it very often, and I haven't done it very often. But, you know, even if it's just going outside and getting some fresh air. Unfortunately, I'm not in a space where I can read for pleasure. Everything I read right now is for school. But ultimately, watching a movie on Netflix, grabbing a book, or even just doing something that seems so old-fashioned, picking up the phone and calling a girlfriend. I think we've gotten so used to the texting, the Zooming. You know, I just had a friend, and I shared with them, and I said, listen, write me a letter. You know, we lost touch with so many of the old forms of communication, right? I still print Christmas cards and mail out Christmas cards. Some of the basic foundational traditions, right? We are in such a fast-paced environment. You know, make sure to ask your fellow neighbor, your family member, and friends, how are you really doing? Are you really okay? I mean, I see it with my students. Just simply asking someone, are you okay? You know, will sometimes open up a whole can of worms, but sometimes that's all they need to hear, right? And you say, it's gonna be all right, right? So while we can't physically grab them, hug them, touch them, our words, reaching out matters. So for me, if I'm able to reach out and make someone feel good, that's my way of doing self-care.
I love that. Always paying it forward, girl.
Trying to.
Elena, guess what? Guess what time it is?
Uh-oh.
It is rapid fire questions.
All right, I'm gonna try to do my best.
Okay. So pretty much you have 30 seconds to answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Okay, I'll try not to get myself in trouble. Go.
Don't get in trouble. We want you to. Ready? In 3, 2, 1, go.
Morning or night person?
Night.
Bata or birthday suit?
Birthday suit.
Snowy nights or beachy sunsets?
Beachy sunsets.
Face-to-face or virtual school learning?
Face-to-face.
Red or white wine?
Red.
Home cooking or
all the way.
home cooking or delivery service?
Depends on the day and night.
It's true. It's true.
Now I would love someone to deliver some sancocho. Right now, this is sancocho weather.
Yes, it is.
You want some? I'll send it in the Uber.
Okay, good.
Finally, your favorite curse word?
I guess it's shit.
Really?
I would say that one is the first one, and you know, probably the other one would be the F word, which obviously I'm going to be known for without giving all the spoiler alerts, right? I'm known as the cursing professor in the Netflix flick. That one I would say is probably the close second, but that one I curse in context. And by the way, it's statistically significant, or at least I've read in studies, that people who curse are really great people and really smart. So I really think, although that is something I have to work on, that it's okay too.
We're fucking great people.
Yes.
Okay.
Am I like the only one that substitutes like curse words with like corny stuff?
Yeah, you say fudge. fudgesicles.
Fudge and holy sugars. And oh my goodness. And like, I'm such a freaking dork. Anyway.
We can't both be like sailors. It's okay. One of us has to be the good one.
You need the yin and the yang.
So, yeah, dude.
The sugar and spice.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, Elena. You're working on your master's. What's next for you? Oh, verdad que. Hello.
God willing, in a couple of years, you can call me doctora.
Doctora Elena, tell us entonces your PhD that you're gonna be, and you're gonna have it very, very soon, and we're gonna be there. Dun, 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 dun. Tell us about any other projects that we should be looking out for you. Tell everybody.
Yes, in the spring of 2023, Fresh, Fly, and Fabulous, 50 Years of Hip Hop Style will debut at the Museum of FIT. Definitely check it out, with a book coming right before that.
Listen, you talked earlier about you want to leave a legacy and this is what you're working towards, but you've already been doing it. So it's like everything else you're doing is just like sprinkles and cherry and fudge sauce and another cherry. It's like you're really doing it, and we admire you for that.
Oh, thank you. I can only do it because I'm completely single. Trust me. If I don't have. But that's on the list this year. We're gonna work on that.
It's gonna happen organically, and it has to be somebody on that same legacy wave.
Absolutely. Como dice mi papá, para estar mal acompañado es mejor estar sola. I've been sola for a very long time. It's fine.
Listen, Elena, hello. You told us in this whole entire show that everything has come to you, and it has come to you by you just talking and manifesting and insisting and doing.
Right, you gotta speak it. Just put it out into existence. I'll take a winning lottery ticket while I'm at it too. No te crea, because this hard work. Trust me, I'm completely fine being a socialite.
I swear, girl.
My tea. But for now, I gotta work for it.
De esos millones ya vienen por ahí. You're working towards it. This legacy you're building is on another level, really, like seriously. And it was so great talking to you. Thank you. Please tell everyone where they can watch Latinas, where they can watch the remix, hip hop and fashion, as well as Fresh Dressed, how they can connect with you, your social media.
You can watch Latinas the second Tuesday of every month at 8:30 on CUNY TV. You'll have to check your local cable listings, but we're also on YouTube. For the remix, you can watch us on Netflix. It's currently on Netflix. To watch Fresh Dress, you can watch that on Amazon Prime. And to reach me, you can hit me up on Instagram. I'm at Prof. E. Romero, or at Freestyling on Twitter and on Facebook. And my website, Elena-Romero.com.
Yes, Elena, you are officially a Sistah. You're a sister, girl.
What do you want to be? I'm one of her serious people, but what can I do? I don't sing, I don't dance.
You're amazing. You don't have to sing or dance to be amazing. You're freaking amazing. You're a writer. You're a badass mom to 3 beautiful girls. One is turning 10 today. Come on, girl.
Well, you guys have amazing chemistry and energy. So, las cosas van a seguir mejorando. El próximo año, tú vas a ver.
Amén, amén y amén. Un abrazo.
No tenemos Walter, but Elena said it just as good.
New generation. Thank you, Elena. Thank you so much.
Thank you.